What's the timeline right now on recruiting? It's pretty quiet, huh?
Well, they've been hosting a bunch of visitors. So last Thursday, they got the first commitment of the well, I guess they got some commitments that, Harold Perkins and all those guys committed. But for, I guess, 23, they had one commitment, Omar and Miller, from here in Louisiana, but he's been on board since the O era. So I think everyone was kind of waiting to see when the first domino for Kelly would drop in this current class. And last week they got their second commitment, but Kelly's first for him in this cycle. And Mac Markway, who plays at DeSmet, which is where Robert Steeples was the head coach just 2 years ago. They've got Mekhi Wingo, they took as an, like I said, Missouri transfer, played there, targeting some other guys from the high school. So, and it's a big high school, like, one of the best high school football teams in the country. So it's a good connection to have. But Markway he's like 6'3" or 4", 240. So like an inline blocking tight end all the way. And that's not the sexiest thing to hear, but anyone who's sort of looked at LSU's roster or heard the interviews, a blocking tight end is what about up there, 1 or 2 on the list of things they had to have, because you've got Jack Mashburn and Cole Taylor right now. You'll bring in a freshman, Mason Taylor, this summer. He's still not a true inline guy, so that a guy like that is exactly what they needed. And I think they'll still look in the portal for tight ends.
Chili, hashtag Ask Shea. Shea, what are you hearing about the big defensive end out of Maryland? Is that Nikos? He says Nyckois.
Yeah, Nicholas. Yes, I think it's Harbor is his last name. He's one of, I'd say, it feels like double-digit guys that Jamar Cain's on nationally, and you'll see LSU throwing around with Jaden Wayne, a 5-star up in Washington, sort of all pockets of the country. These top 100 D linemen, top 150 D linemen, and that's in large part because Cain's the only one on the staff. Brad Davis is still on the staff, but that gets brought in. And think about this. He's like, if you're Joe Sloan and you're coming here to recruit quarterbacks, you're not recruiting the same quarterbacks you were recruiting at La Tech.
Sure.
If you're, Denbrock, you're not recruiting the same guys you were at Cincinnati. And even Kelly and them at Notre Dame, LSU's different. Jamar Cain's coming from OU. Yeah. And he talked about this whenever we got to talk to the coaches a couple weeks back, but he said, look, I had my 22 class at OU already done by about this time last year, so I started recruiting all the national 23 guys. Well, take off the OU polo and put on an LSU one, and you're in the same high school. You're in the same,
same
after the same kids. And he was like, I've been knowing all these guys for a year now. So I think you'll see them start to make headway. They've got guys in on visits and all that already every weekend, it seems. But those dominoes will start dropping. LSU will have a good D-line class, and I think, Cain's a really good recruiter, and kids like him, but I think he's also got a really nice head start, the fact that he's just going from a blue blood to another one.
Have you been able to get any feedback on the recruiters on staff? It looked like Kelly put a big emphasis on finding that recruiting mixture of on-the-field coaching and development to somebody who could win in the living room as well. Have you? I've heard really good things about Cortez Hankton down in New Orleans, obviously.
Right. Well, Frank and you know what Frank can do. You know what Hankton can do in New Orleans. I think Steeples is another young guy and already is paying off at his former high school that, and just talking to corners from around the country, they seem to like him a lot. You kind of always wonder what Denbrock and House and, what your coordinators do as recruiting guys. Are they just more focused on the team? And it's fine either way. But from how Tyrann Mathieu talked, it seems like Matt House is a guy that kind of gets, can resonate with everyone. And Harold Perkins talked about it, doing Zooms with Matt House and talking about how he fit in and how he really liked it. So it does seem that like Joe Sloan is a younger guy. He's in his 30s. He's going to be able to have a rapport with, quarterbacks and that experience, not being out there at 70 years old trying to recruit them.
We keep hearing J.R. Belton and Jordan Arsenault from the guys that we have on to talk recruiting,
right,
whether it's prospects or guys that are making relationship inroads for LSU football. It seems to always come back to one of those two guys or both.
Yeah, and they've got a lot of guys like that. Bobby, who came from Georgia, Sherman, who came from La Tech and is obviously from South Louisiana, Corey, a guy who came from the East Coast. But they've built up that kind of, I guess you would say, room or personnel department, whatever it is. I don't know all their exact titles. But when it comes to recruiting, they all, are the guys who, when you're practicing on a Saturday, the coaches ain't driving kids around campus. That's who it's hanging out with them all day. And you have to have that, right? I mean, LSU had that under Les. They had it under O, and certainly I think Kelly saw the need for it. And JR is one of the guys, Will Redmond the other, that were on that old staff that were actually kept. So I think they've probably been the leaders for that group. And we'll see how it goes. But yeah, a lot of the kids I talk to talk about those guys just as much as they do coaches.
Reed Rule, hashtag Ask Shea. Shea, is the freshman place kicker Dibbert the guy for field goals, or is this a possible transfer spot?
Are we saying that right?
We don't know.
Dibbert?
Ooh, we've been calling him
Where's
Dilbert.
he from?
Nate,
he from
you know his
Louisiana?
first name's Nathan, so just
Michigan.
Nate.
So
Dog.
it's
Nate.
not D-Bear.
Nate D.
Nate D, that'll work.
Nate D.
Diesel.
I'd have to think old Nate D has impressed them enough because, well, they had a long snapper. Now Quentin Skinner went in the portal, so and when he wasn't at the bowl game, you figured something was up. But they took a long snapper out of the portal, and they've got a punter in Peyton Todd, who's the number one punter in the country. But they took Notre Dame's punter, as a grad transfer who will be here this summer. So clearly they thought, probably that Peyton Todd does have a future and could be the real deal, but he's never punted in a game before. So how do we get him some help? Nate D never kicked in a game either, and they didn't go get him any help. So maybe they do, they've got some preferred walk-ons or something behind the scenes that you can go grab that's been at another school that can, be an insurance valve for you. But I would guess they like him. I mean, he was a top 3 or 4 kicker in the country. I'll say this. People will say spoiled under, Cade York and
Cole
Tracy. Those were McMahon guys, and McMahon got Nate D, Dibbert, and locked him up last summer. And, even when McMahon retired, he told him, look, stick with it. This will be the spot for you. And he came all the way down from Michigan. So if McMahon signed off on it, I bet the kid's good.
Last one. The GOAT asks Shea, what's going on with Antoine Sampa?
I don't know. He's almost in the Josh White. I mean, they came in together, but linebackers who haven't played a ton, who also were injured, but he's been out there. So maybe he's sticking it out. I think, too, and I'm not speaking directly to him at all, but after spring ball, maybe more guys kind of enter the portal because you start to get a feel for, okay, am I in the 2 deep? Am I running third team right now? Is it time for a change of scenery? These 15 practices will determine a lot of that. So Sampa's one of a lot of guys that I'm watching that, you aren't imagining are going to be starters, but you're wondering how far have they come after a few years in the program.
We saw George Helmsley on social media saying he was going to LSU as a preferred walk-on quarterback. Is this...
My man did I didn't even know that.
Yeah, I mean, it was all over social yesterday in the sense of I think he was just
excuse me for not being all over social yesterday.
Yeah, well, obviously you were following that Tyrann Mathieu interview.
Yes. I will say that I always like to keep a couple of preferred walk-ons. They have Tavion Falk has been out there, but Matt O'Dowd was their other preferred walk-on, and then he got hurt in bowl practice. I remember that because they're like, our walk-ons are hurt right now. Like when it was the whole is Nussmeier going to play thing, but I haven't seen O'Dowd out there, so maybe that has something to do with that bring another guy in.
You're covering spring football. What's going up on Go 247? I've seen the reports. But,
just out of practice, giving some thoughts and observations and kind of what we're hearing. But yeah, we'll be out there again today.